Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Aarna Sahu, host of Aarna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. Today on episode 94.
But I still had contacts there, and one person randomly reached out to me one day via email and said, we are looking for reviewers to come and help review NASA proposals from academic facilities that are trying to build hardware that's going to space. And I thought I was volunteering until they started sending checks in the mail. And I had to phone human resources and ask them, okay, did you guys make a mistake? And they're like, no, you work here. You have an employee ID. You're here in our record system. I'm like, oh, okay. And I started to just kind of go with the flow, build a career path around that, and just sit back and engage and listen to other people in these meetings during these review panels. And that's how I got to know why I wanted to go into STEM, why I wanted to be in space. But just tracing back to that time.
Today on episode 94, I'm pleased to announce our guest, Madison Feehan, founder and CEO of Space Copy. As an early career professional based in Canada with a background in advanced lunar instrument development for NASA's Planetary Science, Heliophysics, and Astrophysics divisions, Madison's initiatives are focused towards combining deep tech development with entrepreneurship. Madison's background is based in commerce, and she holds a Harvard Business School certification in entrepreneurship and innovation, in conjunction with her ongoing studies in international business. As the CEO and founder of Space Copy, an international lunar manufacturing company, and co-founder and CFO of Moon Trades, a STEM education and lunar robotics startup, Madison leads groundbreaking initiatives driving innovation in space technology and fostering accessible STEM education, as well as serving as a G100 Region Chair of Space Technology and Aviation for the province of Alberta, Canada. Her commitment to shaping foreign policies for small businesses in STEM through volunteer work with consortiums, including the United Nations, and mentoring others in sciences reflects her dedication to propelling the space industry forward through collaboration and visionary leadership. So thank you so much, Madison, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, well, thank you so much, Aarna. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. And you have done a fabulous job of introducing me. Wow. Thank you so much. And yeah, to say that my work in space is pretty diverse would be, I think, a good characterization. So yeah, let's dive into it.
Thank you so much. So my first question for you is tell us a bit about your career path.
Okay, well, you kind of did a good job in the introduction, but as you mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of a 3D printing startup called Space Copy. And essentially, what we do there is we're building additive manufacturing systems. So, is to say 3D printers that are able to create infrastructure in extreme environments, both on Earth and in space. And we do that by taking any kind of local material like soil or sand and crushing it, breaking it down, and turning that into a feedstock that can be fed through a 3D printer to create anything from precision tools to bricks for housing to tiles that can be used for roadways or launch pads if you're thinking for space, all the way down to some of the smaller things like repair parts fabrication. A bit about my career path in addition to the work I do at Space Copy. As you mentioned, I'm also a co-founder of a STEM education and lunar robotics platform that's called Moon Trades. And we are in progress of developing some STEM content that is aimed towards high school, university, and early career professionals to teach them the introductory concepts of space and how to advance their careers if you're looking to have a career in the space and defense industry. And then last but not least, and I guess is kind of the catalyst of how I started my career, is I started at NASA's Planetary Science Division and worked in a whole bunch of different areas. So like heliophysics, studying the sun, and astrophysics, studying like the gravitational effects of planetary bodies and different kinds of radiation sources. And we spent a lot of time kind of like going through what space technology was being developed where and why it was useful. And all of these kind of things just kind of culminated into what I kind of consider my career path.
I love that. I mean, you have so many different experiences and opportunities. Like, you are the CEO and founder of Space Copy, but you're also giving back to the community and teaching other students a lot about space. And I think that's really, really cool.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege more than anything because there's so much innovation that's coming from the next generation of STEM. And, I like to talk about women entering into STEM a lot. We only make up around 18% of that workforce. And I think a huge part of the reasoning behind that is that we don't understand, as a collective group of female scientists or students who want to get into science, that there are ways to break down the barriers that will help get you from point A to point B, and you can have a really fulfilling career in so many different niche areas.
Absolutely. And my question for you is, what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? And do you have any tips to succeed?
Oh, most certainly. It's a really compelling question, too. Wanting to pursue a career in STEM in general, but also in space, relies a lot, in my personal belief, on persistence and motivation and having an innate drive to want to learn more. I always say knowledge is power, and going out there and trying to ascertain more information. If you can make it part of your school curriculum to work on projects that are related to science, that are related to space, if that's the way that you want to shape your career trajectory, then looking for ways to kind of contribute to that industry through your education is definitely ground zero. I would definitely say, if you were going to try and build up that platform even more for yourself, then engaging with consortiums. There's a whole bunch of online communities that are dedicated to space that have varying levels of expertise from beginner all the way up to the crazy nuclear scientist organizations. There's definitely a few of them out there. Another good place that I would recommend is looking for non-for-profits and NGO platforms that look to integrate science hobbyists into kind of the STEM industry. An example I can give is a platform called Zooniverse, and that is a place where a whole bunch of different agencies, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be science, but there is a pretty big presence from places like NASA and the European Space Agency, where they just upload open source projects like imagery that was taken from satellites or stuff from James Webb Space Telescope, for example, that needs to be analyzed, like raw data about stars. And they're looking for people just to randomly come in there and learn how to use the system and create data logs. And all of that information goes back to these space agencies and helps them to create meaningful and tangible data based on what everyday people are seeing. So I would say for anybody who wants to pursue a career like this, look for these resources that can build up your soft and hard skills while also trying to connect it to your education.
I love that. That is so cool. I didn't really know that big companies like NASA could just give some, open source projects for like normal people to use. I thought it was always, only certain people could be a part of the company and do cool projects, but apparently a lot of people can use it. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's a well-kept secret too. You have to do some digging, but this is where I come back to the whole persistence and motivation part of it. I think if you have that motivation and drive to go out there and start communicating, start looking, you're going to find a lot of resources. Oh, you know what? That actually brings up another one that I want to share. This one is more NASA specific. It's called the NASA Space Apps Challenge. That one is literally geared towards students of all ages to be able to come up with technology solutions for NASA. Now, that is pretty much your direct pathway besides getting an internship at a space company. If you want to do something in the space domain, but you don't have a lot of experience, I would say go for the NASA Space Apps Challenge. I did that for a couple of years, and the first year that I did it, it was a 3D printing concept for space, and that actually ended up being the catalyst for how I started my company.
That is so cool. I did not know that these resources existed, so I will definitely be using them, and I'm pretty sure the audience will as well.
Awesome.
All right, and my question for you is what is a common myth about your profession that you want to debunk?
Hmm, it's a compelling one. Common myth, I think, at least in the science industry, you kind of have to stop and think like maybe the stereotype is you have to have a degree in aerospace engineering in order to be in space. For myself, for example, I'm getting my degree in commerce right now, and I'm an undergraduate student, yet I still have this kind of vast experience. Whereas you would kind of imagine in the space industry that you might not even get an opportunity to enter into this unless you have a PhD in some kind of science-related field like engineering or geology or mathematics. That is a myth to debunk. Um, if you take a look at the aerospace landscape, there's so many different facets to it. There's government industries like NASA and all the common places you would associate with space. But there's also a thriving ecosystem of small businesses and even some of the larger private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin where a lot of the onus on their staff is not necessarily on having to have a PhD in something. It's having business development experience or experience in space law or any other of these varying social sciences that you wouldn't commonly associate with the space industry. So I think if there's kind of like a lesson that I can drive home from this is debunking the myth that you have to do one specific education path in order to have a very specific career. Of course, if this is something that you want to pursue, if you want to be a rocket propulsion engineer, then you're probably going to want to pursue a PhD in that area. But if you're just wanting to be in the space industry and you're unsure that that's a kind of technical area that you want to dive into, or if you're somebody who maybe already has a degree or you're working on a degree and you don't want to have to change your path, but you still want to be in that industry, just kind of like understand that no matter what pathway you end up on in your education, there's usually a place for you here.
Absolutely. I love what you said there. And also, society places an emphasis on having like a piece of paper that says blah, blah, blah certifies that you have this expertise. But at the same time, the best way that you can learn something is just by doing it. As you said, people might think that you might need a PhD to do certain things. Like, of course, you might need it for rocket propulsion, but if you really want to start off in like any type of industry, you don't necessarily need the experience. Like you don't need to have like 100, like 200 years of experience in whatever you're doing. You can just like, of course, if you're doing something already, like for example, you're in commerce, but you're also working on space copy, that's totally okay because you're merging your interests together. So you can definitely work on that too.
Absolutely, wholeheartedly agree. There's so much potential. And more than anything, I would just want to communicate to people is not to limit yourself because there's so much diversity.
Absolutely. There's so much diversity. And this is a great segue to my question, which is if you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
Wow, that one is definitely one to stop and think on. To be quite honest with you, I think maybe the only other thing that I would suggest is if you were like looking for specific opportunities, maybe in education to kind of create that pathway, like you were mentioning certifications to do certain things. If you wanted to go down that road, how would you pursue that? Um, I would just kind of answer that question by saying that, if you wanted to go down like a very specific career path, like if you're in high school, if you have a very ideation of how you want your career path to go, you're like, that's it, I'm set. I'm going to be a biologist, or I'm going to be a robotics engineer. The best thing that I would suggest is looking at what's available for online education. So when you introduced me, you talked a little bit about Harvard Business School. So I did a 2-year program with them that was centered on entrepreneurship and innovation. And they taught us about negotiations. They taught us about the facets of starting a business. And they taught us about a really compelling type of theory called disruptive innovation. And throughout that journey, and it was an e-learning journey too. It was the best online education I've ever had. You had the opportunity to engage with peers. You got to read case studies. You got to be interactive with the education. And so much of that just built up the soft skills that I think were needed to succeed, both in where my career path went and also in my post-secondary education. Like, I feel like it was a great segue for me to start business school, having that kind of experience. And I would recommend that to anybody who wants to pursue a very specific career path. Is like, if you know what you want, go out there and find a couple of educational resources. A lot of them are free to sign up. Take a Coursera course, take a LinkedIn learning course about that specific domain. And then by the time that you end up in that career path, or by the time you end up in your post-secondary education and you're starting to learn these concepts, you have the advantage of saying, hey, I know about this because I took the time out and I learned about what I liked and what I wanted. And I pursued that. And now I have this tangible knowledge that can be applied to these real world scenarios.
100% agreed. And a couple years ago, I was really interested in cloud computing. Like my dad, he was in the domain. And in this field, you could take certifications from Google and AWS, which is the cloud platform from Amazon. But basically, my dad took a bunch of these courses and the certifications, and I was like, okay, maybe I should do it. Like, I was in middle school at the time, but I was like, you know what, it's fine. I'll just do it because I'm interested. So I took one of like the basic certifications and I passed. And then I put it on my LinkedIn, and it was really, really nice because I could see so many different opportunities. I could kind of understand what was going on because I took this course and I had a certification to say, okay, I did pass it. So, even though you might not want to like directly pursue it because now I'm not really that interested in the field, but I know more about that field because I took that course. Like, even if you don't want to pursue the industry or you're just interested, just take a course. Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's not, but as you said, knowledge is power.
Oh my gosh, yes, that is so empowering. And you literally just drove home my entire point. And, good for you. You're setting a precedent too, is we need to have, more students who are, in that middle school to high school range that are starting to think about their careers and then actually doing something that's going to give you some knowledge. You don't even necessarily have to go into that domain, but at least you know about it and whether or not it ends up being a like or a dislike. And almost like in a weird butterfly effect kind of way, sometimes those skills translate back into what you do in the future. I can definitely say that there's been a couple of times where I attended like a space workshop or I went to a conference and I sat in on a proceeding and I just sat and listened in the audience for an hour about a topic that I knew nothing about and figured that I'd probably never use that knowledge again. And then lo and behold, 6 months later or 2 years later, it comes back around and all of a sudden this information becomes useful.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show that your interests, they will change, but why not act upon it now? Like I personally, I don't really see myself in the cloud domain, but because I decided to be like, okay, I'll just, sit in the conference or I'll just take the course, even though I don't know if I'll use this later, it was still pretty helpful because I was able to take that certification and, it came up for you, the knowledge. So it's really helpful if you just act upon what you want to do now instead of waiting for the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. The future is now, right? And I always say that, like in the space industry, we have the advantage of all of us who are here, whether or not you're involved in it, we are part of the generation that sets the precedent for what the future looks like. And I think that goes for pretty much any industry that you're involved in, especially science, but I am biased about that. But for as long as there is a passionate workforce and there is interest in these kind of fields, then there's always going to be expansion and growth and improvement, and you can pretty much overcome any kind of challenge that you have along the way.
I absolutely love what you said there.
Thank you so much.
All right, and my question is, what are the best resources/books that have helped you find your career path?
Okay. I'll answer both from a science perspective and also from a business perspective. From the business side of things, I can recommend one author, and this was also during my Harvard education experience that I got to know of his work. is Professor Clayton Christensen, who is like the godfather of disruptive innovation. And he taught all about if you're working in a big organization or a small organization, if you're starting your own business or you're working for somebody else, you can disrupt the industry that you're part of by using these strategic methods. And he used to outline all of these different ways that we can approach things like team conflicts and management and understanding the ebbs and flows of the economy and cultural differences in dealing with different people in different business settings. And that brought a lot of value to me when I was trying to go into entrepreneurship. Another book that I could definitely say, and I went through an accelerator program with Techstars. It was the first thing that I did when I started Space Copy. And the book that was recommended to me on pretty much the first day that I got there, one of the early stage advisors in that program said, "Whatever you do, do not leave this cohort without buying a copy and reading The Mum Test by Rob Fitzpatrick." And that was basically like the how-to guide as an entrepreneur to be able to sift out between when people were just giving you compliments to humor you versus when they actually wanted to work with you. And I think being able to discern the psychology behind, is this person just really, really interested in what I'm doing and they want to be part of it because they understand the value proposition, or are they just there because they think it's cool and they want to humor you? Those resources for me were the best. And then let me switch it to now a technical science perspective. Um, for me, career building came from a lot of conversations with subject matter experts to figure out, are we on the right path? What could we be doing better? And for me personally, there was things like an open to join organization called NASA's Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium, abbreviated as LSIC. That is an organization that's just filled with scientists in the most technical domains humanly imaginable. So if you have like the craziest unanswered space question, like how do you prevent lunar dust from sticking to the inside of a 3D printing chamber under microgravity conditions, or just something completely technical and crazy, if you will, you could go to those kind of places and you could ask those questions and find a really supportive network of people. So I would say that for me, those resources worked great. But for others, I would just say, like, if you're going into any kind of business related stuff, pick up books on disruptive innovation and how to read people in business. And if you're looking at science stuff, just get out there and join organizations and online consortiums and groups that are dedicated to knowledge sharing.
I love those. And knowledge is power because, of course, in a technical place, technology is always going to evolve. So maybe books might not be the best resource because they might be outdated. But of course, there's always some really good information in books. But definitely talking to the people who are currently in the industry you're in, and maybe they have some tips and stuff that you didn't know about, and maybe
Yep.
you have some stuff that they didn't know about. So you can definitely connect with people and network. But I absolutely love those books and I'm definitely going to check them out.
Wonderful. Yeah, I would definitely give them 6 stars out of 5 if I could.
And my question for you is, what do you think is the vital factor that shaped your career? What was your life before learning it, and what was your life after learning it?
I would say it comes down to two really important things. The first one was having like a good professional supportive network. Like I kind of preambled into this by stating that having conversations with people who are in the industry makes all the difference in the world because you get to know whether or not you're on the right track. But I think first and foremost, what's really at the core of building up a successful student, especially when they're young, when you're still a kid and you're trying to figure out what your career path is going to be, is support from your family. And I consider myself very lucky, very, very lucky to have had a great support system at home. Like my mom was always out there. She was saying, you've got to pursue this. She was the one who instilled the whole knowledge is power inside of me. And she was always encouraging me to pursue my dreams. Like even if they didn't 100% translate to something that would immediately say this is going to be a profitable career. At least it was something that was tangible, something that I had passion in, and something that would actually make a meaningful difference in this industry. And I can definitely say that throughout my journey, trying to build a career path, jumping from a time at NASA, which is a whirlwind in itself, to starting a business and then having the privilege to travel all over the world to different continents and countries and give presentations at events all over the place. It all comes back to the end of having a really good supportive network within your family who believes in your dream and is there to support it and might not 100% understand how all of it works, but is here for the ride anyways.
I love that. And having a support system is so crucial. And these will come from your family and friends and just people who are around you because when you're down, they can always have your back and they can really just help you succeed. I absolutely love that.
Absolutely. And the kind of latter part of your question was like, what was life like after having that kind of impact? And I can take a step back and look now, and I can say that, even 2 years ago, I wouldn't have seen myself on this pathway at all. I didn't think that I was going to go into entrepreneurship. It was something I was interested in, but I didn't see myself going down that road, at least not in the space industry, something so ambitious and something that doesn't immediately say, okay, we're going to make money in this. No, we're here because we're passionate. And without that kind of internal support, I don't know if, this company would be to where it is today at the same caliber, at the same level of public growth. I think that a lot of that at the end of the day gets attributed to having somebody who's in your corner.
I love that. I love that so much. And because we have some additional time, my last question for you is what's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career path?
That's a great question. I think the funny thing here is that when I started my career path, I actually didn't know what my career path was going to be. I originally had tried to pitch an idea to NASA when I was 14 about 3D printing on Mars, and it actually got rejected. And they said, that's a great idea, but this is not the proper place and time and division to be sending this to. So I kind of gave up on it. But I still had contacts there, and one person randomly reached out to me one day via email and said, "We are looking for um, reviewers to come and help review NASA proposals from like academic facilities that are trying to build hardware that's going to space." And I thought I was volunteering until they started sending checks in the mail. And I had to phone human resources and ask them, okay, did you guys make a mistake? And they're like, no, you work here. You have an employee ID. You're here in our record system. I'm like, oh, okay. And I started to just kind of go with the flow, build a career path around that, and just sit back and like engage and listen to other people in these meetings during these review panels. And that's how I got to know why I wanted to go into STEM, why I wanted to be in space. But just tracing back to that time, if there's one thing that I wish that I would have known, and I will say that I am glad that I didn't, but in hindsight, maybe it would have been useful, is how challenging it is to start a business in space. Not just to be part of the framework, like anybody can go work for a space company, anybody can get an internship with NASA if you have the proper credentials for it. But going specifically into entrepreneurship in itself, it's a beast. You have to worry about taxes and intellectual property and registering your company. And then you have to compete and find clients and win government contracts if you're trying to sell your technology to the Department of Defense or something. It's an arm full of work. And you have to have a good support structure. You have to have some kind of team behind you because otherwise you can burn out pretty easily. And I think at the end of the day, the lesson here is remembering to find some degree of balance. You can hit that industry as hard as you possibly want to, and all the best to you if you are going out there and persevering as you should. But just remember that, if you're going to start a business, it comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of unforeseen challenges. And there's not always a one size fits all solution. I think if you're like working in a big company, if you have a dispute, you can go to human resources or you can go to your superior and have that conversation. But when you're an entrepreneur, you are the person who is responsible for everything. You wear all the hats. So without there being functionality and cohesiveness between all of these different things, it could fall apart. So I think that at the end of the day, if I would have known something was to be careful, be cautious, learn everything that you can early on so that you don't have any of these difficulties down the road. So I would pass that knowledge on to anybody else who's considering entrepreneurship in any domain. Make sure you take a look at your market and what's required to start a business wherever you live, and then start to think about if that's the career path that you want for yourself, because it is rewarding. And I wouldn't change anything in the world for the path that I pursued, but definitely be aware that you have got your work cut out for you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Madison, for being here today. Before we end off, do you have any last words to the audience?
I would just like to say that this was a really empowering conversation. And I hope that the takeaway from other listeners is that you take this knowledge that you have, no matter what you're pursuing in your life, for academics or for career, especially STEM oriented, pursue everything that you are interested in and don't let anybody tell you that you can't. There is an abundance of opportunity. And I like to think, especially in space, but in the science community in general, things are broadening and they're opening up. So if you want to have a career in that domain, do not let somebody tell you that you can't based on one specific part of your identity or one specific credential that you're missing, or maybe you live in a small town, or maybe you don't have that education. That doesn't mean that the opportunity isn't out there for you. There is a huge supportive network on a global basis in the STEM industry that is looking for more people to join the ranks. So get out there and do whatever it takes to pursue your dream.
Absolutely. Thank you so, so much for being here today. I absolutely love talking to you, Madison.
Thank you so much, Aarna. Likewise, I really enjoyed the conversation.
And here are my 3 cents on this episode, Madison. 1. Resilience and problem-solving skills. Perseverance and consistently working through challenges builds this resilience. Overcoming obstacles enhances problem-solving skills and strengthens your ability to handle setbacks. 2. Self-education and continuous learning. Dive into an industry without formal certification encourages self-education. This approach helps you develop the habit of continuous learning, staying updated with the latest trends and advancements. And 3, independence and entrepreneurial spirit. Explore an industry without a traditional pathway fosters independence. You learn to rely on your resourcefulness and creativity, essential traits for entrepreneurship. Thus, that concludes the episode for this week. If you want to know more about how I relate to these amazing topics, then stay tuned for upcoming episodes. A free way to support this show is by leaving it a 5-star rating and a review on the player you are listening to. Let me know what you enjoy about this podcast, as it's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. Once again, thank you for finding me, and I hope we stay in touch with each other. Dito, you're listening to Aarna Sahu, the host of Aarna's News. Toodles!